The sun had just begun to rise over the rugged hills surrounding the small frontier town. Its light spilled over the dusty paths and simple wooden homes, casting long shadows that stretched across the dry earth. At the edge of town, in a modest hut built of rough-hewn wood and stones, lived a woman named Nayeli. She was a widow, barely in her 30s, and already, life had weighed heavily upon her. Her husband, a quiet and hard-working man, had died the previous winter from a fever that had swept through their village. Since then, Nayeli had struggled to provide for her 2 children, little Akecheta, who was 7, and small Onakona, just 4 years old. Each morning, she rose before the sun, her back aching from the small chores that needed to be done before the day fully began. She swept the dirt floor of their hut with a handmade broom, filled a few jugs with water from a nearby stream, and fed what little food she had to her children. The walls of their home were bare except for a few scraps of cloth used as curtains, and a small, faded carving her husband had once made, a gift for protection and hope. It now seemed more like a reminder of what she had lost. Despite her grief, Nayeli did not let despair completely take hold. She worked tirelessly, collecting firewood, tending a small garden of corn and beans, and helping neighbors when they needed a hand. Sometimes, she would travel to the town to barter small things, like dried herbs or handmade baskets, for food or supplies. But each trip reminded her of the harsh reality: there was never enough. The town was full of people who had their own struggles and little patience for someone who could offer only scraps in return. Hunger had become a constant companion in their home. Akecheta would sometimes wake in the middle of the night, asking for food, and Nayeli would soothe him, rubbing his small back, whispering promises of a better tomorrow she wasn't sure she could deliver. Onakona, still too young to fully understand, would cry when her stomach ached, and Nayeli would rock her gently, murmuring songs her husband had loved. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders, heavier than any bundle of firewood she could carry. She could feel herself growing thinner, her hands rough and cracked from constant work, her face lined beyond her years. Some days, she wandered through the hills, picking wild berries or searching for roots to cook. The land was harsh, and the sun could be unforgiving, but it offered her a quiet place to think and plan. She often imagined what life might be like if her husband were still alive, if there were enough food and warm blankets for her children. She imagined the town as a place that welcomed them, instead of a place where every step felt like a struggle to survive. The neighbors knew of her hardship, but many were just as busy trying to survive. Some were kind, leaving small gifts of cornmeal or dried meat on her doorstep. But it was never enough to last more than a day or two. And so, the shadow of worry never left her. Nights were the hardest, when the children slept and she could hear only the wind whistling through the cracks in the walls and the occasional howl of a distant coyote. The silence gave her time to think. And sometimes, fear crept in. What would she do if she could not find enough to feed Akecheta and Onakona tomorrow? One evening, as she sat beside the small fire in their hut, Nayeli stared at the few remaining pieces of dried corn in a clay bowl. She held her children close, trying to convince herself that tomorrow would be better. "We will find enough," she whispered, though she knew it might not be true. Her mind raced, thinking of every possible way to provide. Each idea seemed impossible because of her lack of strength, her lack of money, and the simple truth that the town had little need for what she could offer. The days became a blur of chores, errands, and worry. Nayeli's hands grew rougher, her clothes more tattered, and her stomach ached from hunger. Yet, she never let her children see the full weight of her despair. She smiled when Akecheta proudly showed her a drawing, and she laughed softly when Onakona tripped over her tiny feet. Her love for them was a fierce, protective force that gave her strength even when the world seemed determined to take it away. But desperation has a way of pressing on the mind, slowly whispering dangerous thoughts. Nayeli found herself thinking more often about what she could not have. She watched the townspeople ride by on horses, carrying goods and food, and she imagined what it would be like to have even a small portion of that abundance. Her thoughts turned to the sheriff's horse, a strong, sleek animal she often saw tied outside the wooden jailhouse. The horse was well fed and well cared for, a stark contrast to the hunger and cold her children endured each day. She shook her head, trying to banish the thought. She knew stealing was wrong, and she had always taught her children the difference between right and wrong. But the whisper of desperation grew louder, and the night air carried a chill that made the hunger feel sharper, more urgent. She realized that if she did nothing, her children might go hungry tomorrow, and the next day, and perhaps even longer. Each night, as she lay on her thin straw mattress, she wrestled with her conscience, wondering if there might be a way to survive without breaking the law, or if survival itself demanded an act of courage that could be seen as crime. Nayeli's situation was not just a test of morality, but a battle for the most basic need: life itself. Every choice seemed fraught with danger. One misstep could mean punishment or imprisonment. But to do nothing might mean her children would starve. She spent hours thinking through the possibilities, imagining a scenario in which she could take the horse and use it to gather food and supplies from farther lands, where her skills in gathering and trading might yield enough to survive. Yet even this plan was risky. The sheriff was known for his strict adherence to the law, and the town was small. She could not hope to hide easily. And so, Nayeli's days passed in a strange mixture of hope and fear, determination and despair. She worked tirelessly, always searching for ways to provide for her children. Yet her mind could not ignore the harsh reality staring her in the face. Hunger was relentless, poverty was unyielding, and the world around her seemed indifferent to her struggle. Yet, through it all, Nayeli held on to the most important thing: her love for Akecheta and Onakona. That love gave her courage, even as the shadow of desperation loomed. In the quiet moments before dawn, she would walk to the edge of the town and watch the sheriff's horse standing in the stable. The animal's powerful frame, the sheen of its coat, and the strength in its legs filled her with a mix of awe and longing. She did not crave wealth or comfort for herself, only enough to feed her children. And yet, she knew the line she was approaching was dangerous, one that could change her life forever. As the sun rose higher, casting light on the dusty streets and the hills beyond, Nayeli returned to her hut, gathered what little she had, and began another day. She fed her children, tended her small garden, and tried to find work where she could. But in the quiet corners of her mind, the thought lingered. What if she could take the horse, even just for a short time, to secure enough for her children to eat? The question haunted her, growing louder with each passing day, until it became clear that she might soon face a choice she had never imagined. A choice between breaking the law and saving the lives of those she loved most. And so, the poor Apache widow's story truly began not with the act itself, but with the struggle, the desperation, and the relentless love that drove her to even consider the impossible. Every day was a test, every moment a challenge, and every thought carried the weight of survival. Little did she know, the path she was about to take would bring her face to face with the law, with compassion, and with a lesson that would change her life forever. The night had fallen over the small frontier town, and a thin mist clung to the edges of the dirt streets, softening the harsh outlines of the wooden buildings. Stars blinked faintly in the cold sky, and a pale moon cast a silver glow on the dusty ground. Nayeli, the poor Apache widow, crept quietly along the path leading to the town's center. Her heart pounded in her chest, and every sound seemed magnified: the creak of a loose board under her foot, the distant bark of a dog, the whisper of the wind through the sparse trees. She moved cautiously, her eyes fixed on the stable where the sheriff kept his horse. For weeks, she had watched from afar, studying the routines of the town. She knew when the sheriff was most likely to be busy, when the streets were quiet, and when the shadows would provide cover. Tonight, she thought, might be her only chance. She had little food left for her children, and the empty bowls in her hut haunted her mind with every step she took. Akecheta's worried eyes and Onakona's soft cries echoed in her memory. She could not bear to face another morning without having provided something for them to eat. As she reached the stable, she slowed, taking careful note of her surroundings. The sheriff's horse stood tied to a post, its coat shining faintly in the moonlight. It was a beautiful, strong animal, with deep brown eyes that seemed to look at her as if it understood her plight. Nayeli hesitated for a moment, her hand resting on the post. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "I only want to help my children. I will not harm you." The horse shifted slightly, sensing her presence, and she felt a pang of guilt. She had never considered herself a thief, and yet here she was, contemplating an act she had never imagined she would commit. She worked quickly, moving with practiced stealth. She unfastened the ropes holding the horse, careful not to make a sound. Her hands shook, not just from fear, but from the weight of the choice she was making. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, but the thought of her children's hunger pushed her forward. She gently patted the horse's neck, murmuring words of comfort. The animal remained calm, as if it sensed her intentions were not cruel. Just as she began to guide the horse away from the stable, a firm voice cut through the night. "Stop right there." Nayeli froze, her heart leaping into her throat. She turned slowly, and there, standing in the shadows, was the sheriff. His expression was calm but firm, his eyes studying her carefully. The moonlight revealed the sharp lines of his face and the badge pinned to his chest. He did not move quickly or threaten her, but the authority in his voice was enough to make her feel the full weight of the situation. I'm sorry," Nayeli stammered, stepping back. I only wanted to feed my children." Her voice trembled, but there was honesty in it, and the sheriff seemed to notice. He took a step closer, his boots crunching softly on the dirt, but he did not draw his weapon. Instead, he waited, giving her the chance to explain herself. Nayeli's eyes filled with tears as she spoke. She told him about the loss of her husband, about the cold and hunger her children faced, about the struggle to survive in a town that had little space for someone in her position. She did not try to hide her fear, nor did she try to justify her actions with lies. She only spoke the truth, as quietly and honestly as she could, hoping that somehow he would understand. The sheriff listened in silence. He had seen desperation before, though rarely with such courage and honesty. Many people tried to deceive him or plead for mercy with words that were false or manipulative. But Nayeli's words carried no pretense. There was no hint of trickery, only a mother's desperate love. His eyes softened slightly, though his stance remained firm. He considered his next words carefully, knowing that any action he took could change the course of her life forever. For several long moments, the two of them stood in the cool night, neither speaking. The horse shifted again, its soft hooves scraping the ground. Nayeli swallowed hard, her throat dry, waiting for the sheriff's judgment. She feared punishment, even imprisonment, but she also feared the thought of returning to her children with nothing to give them. The silence was heavy, almost unbearable, and every second seemed to stretch into an eternity. Finally, the sheriff spoke, his voice quiet but clear. "I can see why you did this," he said. "I know what it is to struggle. I know what it is to feel desperate and alone." He paused, letting the words sink in. Nayeli could hardly believe what she was hearing. Many would have drawn their guns or called for the town guards. Yet this man, the sheriff, was speaking to her with understanding, almost kindness. "I cannot turn a blind eye to the law," he continued, "but I can see the truth in your heart. You have done nothing with malice. You acted out of love." Nayeli felt a mix of relief and surprise wash over her. She had expected anger, punishment, perhaps even violence, yet here he was, acknowledging her pain and her honesty. The sheriff stepped closer to the horse and gently took hold of its reins. "I cannot let you take him," he said. "But I can help you in another way." He led Nayeli back toward the main road, where the town's lights glimmered faintly in the distance. He spoke to her quietly, offering advice and guidance on how she could gather food, how she could barter her skills, and how to find help without breaking the law. Nayeli listened intently, hanging on every word, her heart filling with hope she had not felt in weeks. As they walked, the sheriff also warned her of the dangers of attempting theft again. He explained that other townsfolk might not show the same mercy, and that even small acts could lead to serious consequences. Nayeli nodded, fully understanding the gravity of his words. She felt a deep respect for the man who had chosen compassion over punishment, who had recognized her struggle without judgment. When they reached the edge of town, the sheriff turned to her. "You have a strong heart," he said. "Use it wisely. Care for your children, and do not let desperation cloud your judgment again." Nayeli bowed her head, tears streaming down her face. She could barely find words to thank him. Gratitude, relief, and hope mingled together, giving her a sense of strength she thought had been lost forever. That night, as Nayeli returned to her small hut with her children, she carried more than just hope. She carried a renewed sense of purpose. The sheriff's mercy had given her a second chance, and she resolved to find ways to provide for Akacheta and Onakona without resorting to theft. She thought of the horse, standing quietly in the stable, and a smile touched her lips. She would never forget the compassion shown to her, and she would honor it by living with honesty and determination. The days that followed were still difficult, but Nayeli faced them with new courage. She worked harder, traveled further, and accepted help when it was offered. Slowly, she began to find small successes. A neighbor gave her a few baskets of vegetables. Another allowed her to trade handmade goods in the market. And little by little, the fear of empty bowls receded. Her children noticed the change in her spirit, and their laughter returned to the small hut, bringing warmth and life back into their home. The sheriff, too, kept an eye on her from a distance, making sure she was safe without interfering too much. He saw the widow's determination and resilience, and he felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that his act of mercy had made a real difference. Word of the incident spread quietly through the town, and the story of the widow and the sheriff became an example of compassion, showing that even in a harsh and unforgiving world, understanding and kindness could still thrive. And so, the widow's life continued, marked by struggle, but also by hope. She had faced a choice that could have led to punishment, yet she emerged with a new path illuminated by mercy. The lessons of that night stayed with her forever, reminding her that honesty, courage, and love could guide her through even the darkest moments. Nayeli's journey was far from over, but she now knew that even in the most desperate circumstances, there was always a chance for compassion, for understanding, and for a brighter tomorrow. The morning after the night of fear and mercy, Nayeli awoke before sunrise, her mind still heavy with thoughts of the previous evening. The quiet of her small hut was broken only by the soft breathing of Akacheta and Onakona, still asleep on the straw mattress beside her. She sat for a moment, staring at the first hints of light creeping through the small cracks in the walls. Her heart still raced at the memory of the sheriff's voice, calm yet commanding, when he had stopped her from taking the horse. She had never imagined anyone could respond to such an act with understanding instead of anger. The sheriff's words echoed in her mind. "You have a strong heart. Use it wisely. Care for your children, and do not let desperation cloud your judgment again." Nayeli could feel the weight of responsibility these words carried. She understood now that life would continue to test her, that hardship would not disappear overnight, but that there were paths she could take that would honor both her love for her children and her honesty. The sheriff's mercy had opened her eyes to possibilities she had not considered before, and she resolved to follow them with care and diligence. After feeding the children the small remnants of cornmeal she had saved, Nayeli stepped outside. The early morning air was cool and crisp, filling her lungs with a sense of clarity she had not felt in weeks. She walked slowly toward the edge of the town, keeping an eye on the sheriff's office. The horse was already tied to the post outside, grazing quietly on a small patch of dry grass. Nayeli felt a pang of longing, but she reminded herself that this was not hers to take. Instead, she had been given something far more valuable, a chance to prove her integrity and find another way to care for her children. As she walked through the streets, she noticed the townspeople beginning their day. Merchants opened their shops, children ran along the dusty paths, and laborers carried heavy loads to their work. Some glanced at her with polite curiosity, others with indifference. Nayeli had learned to move quietly through the town, avoiding attention when possible. But today, her steps felt lighter. She carried with her a renewed sense of purpose, strengthened by the sheriff's unexpected compassion. Her first stop was a neighbor who often shared small gifts of food. She knocked gently on the door, and an elderly woman greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning, Nayeli," the woman said kindly. "I heard about last night. You did what you thought you had to do, but you are a good mother. Come in. I have some dried beans and cornmeal for you." Nayeli's eyes filled with tears once more. She accepted the gifts gratefully, promising to return the favor when she could. The generosity of others, combined with the sheriff's guidance, gave her hope that she could navigate this world without compromising her values. Over the next few days, Nayeli began to explore new ways to support her family. She gathered wild plants and herbs from the hills, sold small handmade baskets in the market, and offered her help to those who needed extra hands. Every action was a careful balance between survival and honesty, and each small success reminded her that there were choices she could make that did not involve stealing. She felt proud of herself in a way she had not in months, and the children noticed her renewed spirit. Akecheta helped with small chores, and Onakona's laughter returned to their home, brightening even the coldest mornings. Despite the challenges, Nayeli found that the town was not as unwelcoming as she had once thought. Some merchants allowed her to trade her goods for a fair price, while others offered advice and encouragement. Slowly, she began to understand the rhythms of the town, learning when and where she could find the most opportunities. Each small victory was a step toward stability, and each day reinforced her determination to care for her children without resorting to desperation. The sheriff, observing from a distance, noted her progress with quiet satisfaction. He had seen many people in desperate circumstances, but few had the courage, honesty, and perseverance that Nayeli displayed. He admired her resilience and her willingness to work hard despite the hardships she faced. Though he could not interfere directly in her daily life, he offered guidance when needed, and his presence in the town served as a subtle shield against those who might take advantage of her vulnerability. One afternoon, as Nayeli gathered herbs in the hills, she reflected on the events of the past week. She remembered the fear she had felt the night she attempted to take the sheriff's horse, the heavy weight of guilt and desperation pressing on her chest. But she also remembered the calm and understanding in his eyes, the way he had listened without judgment, and the advice he had given her to find honest ways to survive. That memory became a source of strength for her, a reminder that compassion existed even in a harsh world. The sheriff's decision had changed more than just Nayeli's life. It had begun to change the town as well. Word of his mercy spread quietly, and people began to see that kindness could coexist with the law. Merchants were more willing to help those in need, and townsfolk began to notice the struggles of their neighbors with greater empathy. The sheriff's actions had sown a small seed of humanity in the town, a lesson that survival and compassion were not mutually exclusive. Back in her hut, Nayeli worked tirelessly to improve her home and care for her children. She patched the walls, mended clothes, and tended her small garden with renewed vigor. Each day brought its own challenges, but she faced them with a sense of purpose and determination. The fear that had once consumed her was replaced with hope, and she felt a growing confidence in her ability to provide for Akecheta and Onakona. At night, she would tell her children stories of bravery, honesty, and kindness, weaving lessons from her own experiences into the tales. She spoke of the importance of integrity, of helping others when possible, and of facing challenges with courage. Akecheta and Onakona listened with wide eyes, absorbing the lessons and feeling the warmth of their mother's love and resilience. Nayeli knew that these stories would shape their understanding of the world and teach them the values that had guided her through the darkest moments of her life. As the weeks passed, Nayeli's efforts began to bear fruit. Her small garden produced enough to feed the family, and her trades in the market brought in enough to buy occasional treats and supplies. The fear of hunger no longer dominated her thoughts, and the nights were filled with a quiet peace she had not felt in months. She felt a sense of accomplishment and pride, knowing that she had chosen a path of honesty and perseverance rather than desperation. The sheriff continued to watch from a distance, satisfied that his act of mercy had not been in vain. Nayeli had proven that kindness could inspire responsibility and integrity, even in the most difficult circumstances. Her story became an example for others in the town. A reminder that people were capable of change, resilience, and honor when given the opportunity and guidance. Nayeli's journey was far from over. Life on the frontier remained harsh, and challenges would continue to arise. But she faced each day with courage, wisdom, and a sense of hope that had been nurtured by the sheriff's understanding and her own determination. She knew that her love for her children would guide her through any hardship, and that honesty and hard work would lead to a better future. In the quiet moments before dawn, Nayeli would often stand outside her hut, looking at the hills and the distant town, reflecting on the path she had taken. The memory of the night she had almost stolen the sheriff's horse remained with her, but it was no longer a source of shame or fear. Instead, it became a symbol of the choice she had made. The choice to embrace honesty, courage, and compassion in the face of desperation. And so, the poor Apache widow's story continued, marked by resilience, hope, and the lessons of a single act of mercy. Nayeli had faced a choice that could have led to punishment or despair, yet she emerged stronger and wiser, ready to navigate the challenges of life with integrity and love. Her children thrived under her care, and the town slowly learned that understanding and compassion could coexist with the law, creating a small but lasting change in the world around them. Through her courage and the sheriff's kindness, Nayeli discovered that even in the harshest circumstances, there was room for hope, honesty, and a brighter tomorrow. Her story became a quiet legend in the town, a tale told to remind people that mercy could inspire resilience, and that love could guide the heart through the darkest of nights. The days following the sheriff's act of mercy passed with a quiet rhythm in Nayeli's life. Though the frontier town remained harsh and unforgiving, she now carried within her a sense of hope she had not felt for a long time. Every morning, she rose early to tend to her small garden, feed her children, and prepare for the tasks that the day would bring. The memory of the night she had nearly stolen the sheriff's horse lingered in her mind, not as a source of shame, but as a reminder of the mercy and understanding that had been shown to her. It was a guiding light, teaching her that even the smallest acts of compassion could change the course of life. One morning, the sheriff himself appeared at her hut. Nayeli's heart raced at the sound of his firm yet calm footsteps. She opened the door to see him standing there, a gentle smile on his face, and a small bundle of supplies in his hands. Inside were dried beans, cornmeal, a loaf of bread, and a few simple tools that would help her with her daily work. "I thought these might help," he said softly. "It's not much, but it will give you a better start today." Nayeli's eyes welled with tears. She had been surviving on scraps, and this gesture was more than food. It was proof that someone cared, someone understood, and someone believed in her. "I thank you, sir," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know how to repay you." The sheriff shook his head gently. No repayment is necessary. Just take care of your children and continue doing the honest work you've been doing. That is payment enough. He then gave her words of advice. Simple, but wise. Where to gather wild herbs, how to barter effectively in the market, and which neighbors might need extra help in exchange for food or supplies. Nayeli listened carefully, storing every word in her mind, realizing that this guidance was more valuable than the food itself. Over the next few weeks, Nayeli applied the sheriff's advice diligently. She began venturing further into the hills, collecting wild berries, roots, and herbs that she could trade in the town. She offered to help neighbors with chores or to watch their children in exchange for meals. Slowly, a network of support began to form around her, not because she asked for it, but because people saw her honesty, her hard work, and her genuine love for her children. Her reputation as a hard-working, trustworthy woman grew quietly in the town, and with it, a small but meaningful sense of security. Akacheta and Onakona noticed the change in their mother. There was a lightness in her step, a brightness in her eyes, and a warmth in her smile that had been absent during the long months of struggle. The children began to share in the work, helping with the garden, gathering firewood, and learning to barter small goods. Through these small tasks, Nayeli taught them not only the importance of hard work, but also the values of honesty, compassion, and respect for others. Life was still difficult, but the household was filled with laughter, hope, and a renewed sense of purpose. The sheriff continued to watch from a distance, not as a figure of authority to be feared, but as a quiet guardian. He saw Nayeli's determination and resilience, and he felt satisfaction in knowing that his decision had made a real difference. He understood that true justice was not only about enforcing the law, but also about guiding people toward better choices. His act of mercy had created a ripple effect, allowing Nayeli to grow stronger and more independent, while reinforcing the town's understanding of compassion. One afternoon, the sheriff visited Nayeli again, this time with an offer that would change her life even further. He had noticed her dedication and skill in gathering and trading goods, and he suggested a small, honest task that could provide more consistent support for her family. There are travelers who come through town from time to time, he explained. They need guides and helpers to carry supplies and trade along the trails. You have the knowledge of these hills, and you have proven yourself honest and capable. I can arrange for you to help them safely, earning food, and sometimes small coins for your efforts. Nayeli felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The thought of leaving her small home, even for a short time, was intimidating. Yet she also recognized the opportunity it presented, a chance to secure food and resources for her children in a way that respected both the law and her own integrity. She agreed, and over the following weeks, she prepared carefully for her new responsibilities. She learned the routes, studied the travelers' needs, and ensured that Akacheta and Onakona would be cared for in her absence. The work proved challenging but rewarding. Nayeli carried goods over dusty trails, guided travelers safely through the hills, and traded items with skill and fairness. Her reputation grew beyond the town, as travelers spoke of the Apache widow who was strong, kind, and honest. She earned enough food and small coins to feed her children and improve their home. Each evening, she returned tired but satisfied, her children waiting with smiles and laughter that made every effort worthwhile. Through this new work, Nayeli began to understand the full power of the sheriff's kindness. He had not only spared her from punishment, but he had also shown her that trust and compassion could lead to real opportunity. She realized that her life had changed, not because someone had given her food, but because someone had recognized her potential and offered guidance. This lesson stayed with her, shaping the way she interacted with the town and the people around her. In her moments of reflection, Nayeli often thought back to the night she had almost taken the sheriff's horse. She remembered the fear, the desperation, and the uncertainty that had weighed on her heart. But she also remembered the calm, understanding expression in the sheriff's eyes, the gentle words of advice, and the food and guidance he had provided. That night, once filled with tension and worry, now felt like a turning point, a moment when compassion had transformed a life. As the weeks turned into months, Nayeli's life continued to improve. Her home became warmer, her children healthier, and her spirits higher. The fear of starvation that had once haunted every night was replaced by a sense of confidence and security. She had learned the importance of hard work, honesty, and community. And she passed these lessons on to her children, through both words and example. Akecheta began to show skill in bartering and helping travelers, while Onakona developed a keen sense of observation and care for others. Together, they became a small family, strengthened by love, determination, and respect. The sheriff's act of kindness did not go unnoticed. Other townsfolk, hearing of Nayeli's perseverance and integrity, began to offer help when they could. Some provided work, others shared food, and a few offered shelter when storms or harsh weather approached. Slowly, the town's perception of her shifted from a struggling widow to a capable, honest woman who deserved respect and support. Nayeli's life had changed not only because of her own efforts but because of the community that had begun to see her as worthy of trust and assistance. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, Nayeli stood outside her hut, watching the sky turn shades of pink and orange. Akecheta and Onakona played nearby, their laughter echoing across the quiet landscape. Nayeli felt a deep sense of gratitude and relief. Life was still full of challenges, but she now had the tools, support, and confidence to face them. She understood that her journey had not been easy, but she also knew that it had taught her invaluable lessons about perseverance, compassion, and the power of mercy. Through the sheriff's guidance, her own hard work, and the small acts of kindness she received along the way, Nayeli had built a foundation for a better future. Her story became a quiet inspiration in the town, a reminder that even in times of hardship, there was hope, and that compassion could change lives in profound ways. She had learned that courage was not only about facing danger, but also about choosing honesty and integrity, even when survival seemed impossible. And so, the poor Apache widow's life transformed. She had faced desperation, fear, and uncertainty, yet she emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Her children thrived under her care. Her home grew warmer and more secure, and her spirit was renewed with a sense of hope and purpose. The sheriff's act of mercy had not only spared her from punishment, but had opened a path toward a brighter, honest, and fulfilling life. Through these experiences, Nayeli discovered that even the smallest gestures of kindness could ripple outward, creating change not only for herself but also for the community around her. Her story, once marked by struggle and fear, became a testament to the power of compassion, hard work, and unwavering love. And though life would continue to test her, Nayeli faced the future with courage, confidence, and the knowledge that mercy and honesty could guide her through even the darkest times. The seasons slowly changed over the small frontier town, painting the hills and fields in shades of green, gold, and brown. The winds brought cool breezes in autumn and warmer whispers in spring. Through all of these changes, Nayeli continued to work diligently, her life steadily improving. The widow, who had once been desperate, worried, and fearful, had transformed into a woman of quiet strength, resourcefulness, and hope. Her children, Akecheta and Onakona, thrived under her care, growing stronger, healthier, and wiser with each passing day. Nayeli had learned to find opportunity where others might see only struggle. She tended her garden carefully, trading produce for other necessities, and worked with travelers and townspeople in honest and fair ways. Every action she took was guided by integrity, and slowly, the town began to see her not as a desperate widow, but as a capable and trustworthy woman. This shift in perception was not immediate, but over time, her diligence, honesty, and kindness could not be ignored. People began to respect her, sometimes offering work or advice, and occasionally stopping to share a kind word. Despite the improvements in her life, Nayeli never forgot the sheriff who had changed her path. The night she had nearly taken his horse remained vivid in her memory. She remembered the fear, the guilt, and the heavy burden of desperation that had pressed upon her. But she also remembered the calm, understanding expression on his face, the way he had listened to her story, and the advice and guidance he had offered. That single act of mercy had given her more than just a chance to survive. It had given her hope, direction, and a model for compassion that she carried into her interactions with others. One morning, Nayeli found herself walking through the town square, observing the familiar bustle of daily life. Merchants displayed their goods, children played along the dusty streets, and neighbors exchanged greetings. A group of travelers stopped to ask for directions, and Nayeli guided them carefully, sharing knowledge of the trails and safety tips she had learned over the months. They thanked her warmly, impressed not only with her knowledge but also with her honesty and willingness to help. In that moment, Nayeli felt a deep sense of pride. She realized that her life had changed not because of luck, but because of hard work, integrity, and the opportunities created by the sheriff's guidance. The sheriff, observing discreetly from a distance as he often did, noticed the growing respect and independence in Nayeli. He understood that his decision to spare her had been more than an act of mercy. It had been a seed of transformation. By trusting her and providing guidance rather than punishment, he had allowed her to grow stronger and more self-reliant. Nayeli had proven that compassion, when paired with honesty and determination, could have far-reaching effects. Nayeli's children flourished as well. Etched had begun helping her with the garden and trading tasks, learning valuable lessons in responsibility and perseverance. Onakona, curious and observant, had developed a deep care for animals and plants, helping her mother tend the garden and gather herbs. Nayeli took great joy in watching them grow, realizing that the lessons she had learned about honesty, hard work, and compassion were being passed down to the next generation. Her family was no longer defined by fear and scarcity, but by resilience, hope, and love. As time went on, Nayeli's reputation in the town solidified. Merchants and neighbors trusted her, and some sought her advice when dealing with travelers or managing small trades. She became known for her fairness, honesty, and skill, and her children were admired as well, reflecting the values she instilled in them. Her story, quietly shared among townspeople, became an example of how perseverance and integrity could overcome hardship, and how acts of kindness could create lasting change. One afternoon, a traveling merchant arrived in town, carrying goods from distant settlements. He asked Nayeli to assist him in guiding a small caravan through the hills to the next town. This was a larger responsibility than she had ever undertaken, but she accepted, knowing that her knowledge of the land and her reputation for honesty made her the perfect choice. She prepared carefully, ensuring her children were well cared for and that she had all the supplies needed for the journey. During the journey, Nayeli proved herself capable and wise. She guided the travelers safely, managed supplies, and ensured that everyone was treated fairly and respectfully. Her courage, knowledge, and leadership impressed the travelers, who praised her at every opportunity. Nayeli felt a quiet satisfaction, realizing that her life had been transformed not by chance, but by her own efforts, guided by compassion and opportunity. She had faced desperation and fear, yet she had emerged stronger, wiser, and respected by her community and beyond. When she returned home, she was greeted warmly by Apache and Onakona. They had been cared for by neighbors and had spent the day playing and learning, safe and happy. Nayeli felt a profound sense of gratitude for the small but meaningful support network that had grown around her. She knew that life would always have challenges, but she also knew that she had the strength, skills, and guidance to face them. She was no longer alone, no longer defined by scarcity, and no longer consumed by fear. The sheriff continued to watch from a distance, observing the growth and independence of Nayeli and her children. He felt satisfaction in knowing that his choice to show mercy rather than punishment had borne fruit. Nayeli had not only survived but had thrived, becoming an example of resilience and integrity for the entire town. Her story, quietly shared among townspeople, reminded everyone that kindness and understanding could coexist with law and order, and that the right guidance could change the course of a life. Nayeli never forgot the lessons she had learned. She continued to teach her children the importance of honesty, compassion, and hard work, showing them that strength was not measured by force or wealth, but by the choices one made in the face of difficulty. She emphasized that mercy, when paired with integrity, could create profound change, and that acts of kindness, no matter how small, had the power to inspire and transform lives. Over time, Nayeli's life became a story of redemption, hope, and respect. The widow who had once faced desperation now had a secure home, thriving children, and the admiration of her community. She had turned hardship into opportunity, fear into courage, and scarcity into resilience. Every day, she reflected on the night she had nearly stolen the sheriff's horse, understanding that it had been the turning point that led her to this new life. A life filled with dignity, purpose, and love. Even as life continued with its challenges, the weather, the unpredictable hardships of frontier living, and the demands of raising children, Nayeli faced each day with confidence and determination. She had learned to rely not only on her own strength but also on the support and guidance of others. She had become a leader in her own small way, respected for her honesty, skill, and compassion. Her children thrived under her care, and the small family she had built became a symbol of hope and resilience for the town. In the quiet evenings, as the sun dipped below the hills and painted the sky with colors of gold and pink, Nayeli often stood outside her home, watching the children play and listening to the distant sounds of the town. She felt gratitude and peace, knowing that she had faced despair and emerged stronger, wiser, and more capable. Her journey had been difficult, but it had also been transformative, teaching her the value of honesty, the power of mercy, and the strength of love. Through her perseverance, guidance from the sheriff, and the small acts of kindness she had received, Nayeli's life had become a story of inspiration. She had proven that even in the harshest circumstances, compassion, courage, and hard work could create a path toward hope and respect. The widow who had once faced desperation was now a figure of integrity, resilience, and love, leaving a quiet legacy for her children and for the community around her. And so, the story of Nayeli, the poor Apache widow, came full circle. She had faced the hardest of choices, stared fear and desperation in the eyes, and found a path guided by honesty, courage, and compassion. Her children thrived, her home became secure, and the town learned a quiet lesson about mercy, respect, and the transformative power of understanding. Nayeli's life was no longer defined by hardship alone, but by the strength of her spirit, the love for her children, and the enduring power of kindness. Her journey was a testament to the truth that even the smallest act of mercy could create profound change, shaping a life and inspiring a community. Nayeli had survived, thrived, and taught a lasting lesson that love, courage, and integrity were the strongest tools in a world often marked by struggle. The widow, once desperate and fearful, now walked with confidence, her children by her side, and a future filled with hope before her.